Did your legal guardian take you to the nut house at 10 to get electroshock because you were too tired to be put to work on the farm on account of your sleepless nights thinking of a better life in a distant land? Did a storm rock that booby hatch and burn it and its crazy dock to the ground, with you managing to escape on a floating chicken coop thanks to the help of a girl who you'll end up talking to in mirrors? After your escape, did you end up hurled into a nightmarish hellscape with freaks with wheels for hands and feet threatening to chop you into pieces and vainglorious multi-headed princesses opining that they couldn't wait until you were old enough to take your head for their collection? If so, you must have come to in the Unkind Rewind, where we were subjected to the terrifying 1985 children's movie, Return to Oz.
Get to the chopper!
You know what you are? You're one of those little fancy lads, aren't you?
Link and I are cruising the mountain, bro, and we figure we'd squeeze a little juice.
Salutations! I'm Josh Dugan, coming to you from the land of sky blue waters, where I've been fitting my appendages for awkward single wheels to better get around. Joining us from the Big Apple is my co-host, Sean McGrath. Have you been secretly wearing those ruby slippers you found, Sean?
No, I didn't find those. I bought them down in Chinatown.
Okay.
Yeah, just off Mott Street. I think that the guy said that they were legit. So
yeah,
and it was a great deal.
I mean, and you can't click them together without knowing like, oh no, this is the use.
If I click them together, they're going to break. So I'm going to just...
A single click use, yeah.
Yeah. 3 times those things are shattered.
Sure.
But again, apparently 100% real ruby.
Yeah.
That's what he said.
Cool.
So.
Well, fingers crossed. Hope it's not paste.
For $10, I mean, what else do you want?
This week, we're joined by our special guest, who had not seen Return to Oz since his childhood, spent certain that he liked the right movie set in Oz, coming to Dorothy's backyard, where he's hopefully not been hazarding institutionalization by telling his unforgiving aunt stories of his adventures in a strange other land, Max Rieper. Max, why don't you tell the audience who didn't catch last week's installment a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I come from the Dorothy's home state of Kansas, where electroshock therapy is a routine way of raising our children. Mm-hmm. It's what we do here. So
yeah,
it's been on the ballot like every year to get it taken off like the Board of Education.
It's never going away.
Never going away.
It works.
It's actually,
it keeps our kids, working in the field. So
if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
It's one of those issues that like motivates voters too. Like what do you call those things that like gets them riled up?
Yeah, it's definitely it galvanizes the voter bloc and gets them out to the ballot box.
It's like weed, abortion, and then electroshock therapy for children.
Yes, yeah, mm-hmm. Because they've got to be put to work.
Well, they have to learn.
Yeah. So, Max, we know each other from writing about baseball. How long have you been the managing editor of Royals Review?
We're going on a decade now, of blogging about a baseball team that, for the most part, has been pretty terrible. So I don't know what that says about my life, but it's been a treat.
The first 2 years you were managing editor, they did go to the World Series.
Right. So, I like to take some credit for that. But
it's your responsibility.
Yeah. It's a great online community, so it's a lot of fun for me. It's that's why I do it. And, it's nice to have somewhere to nerd out about baseball a little bit.
Yeah.
Is there more to write about when they're a above 500 team, or is there less?
I think people like to. We get more traffic. I think when they're really, really bad. I think there's a lot of gallows humor, and people like commiserating about a bad baseball team rather than a maybe mediocre one. But when they got really good, we got like tons of traffic. So
So
like you want to be really good or really bad. You don't want to be just in between.
Yeah.
So like the White Sox and the Marlins right now are just like crushing the clicks.
I promise you the Marlins aren't.
Yeah, not the Marlins. There's no Miami fans.
There's not a fan
old
base.
to don't know how to use the internet. So
yeah.
I bet there would be some people who would show up if they got to a World Series. I'm not saying they would sell out, but if they got to a World Series, you might get like a 25% occupancy of that stadium.
The Fish Stripes was one of the deadest. I don't know how it is now, but it was definitely one of the most dead SBN team sites.
Oh, the whole writing staff like picked up and left. So it's a ghost town now, I think.
Yeah.
That happened with a couple of sites over some changes, like about podcasts or something like that. But
sure. Okay.
Yeah, but yeah. So I mean, the writers there were good, but yeah, there's just not many fans to write about.
Yeah, and so then why would you keep writing especially since so much of the SBN model is based on sort of dialogue,
Yeah.
Okay, so last week I surmised that I probably saw this as a kid and had a little recollection. Boy, was I wrong. Nothing about this fever dream was even remotely familiar. Sean, did you have a relationship to Return to Oz before this week?
Not at all.
Okay.
I knew of it.
Sure.
It had been built up kind of in how we're talking about it as not really being a kid's movie or being like a sheep and wolves or wolf in sheep's clothing kind of kids movie.
Mm-hmm.
I saw the original Wizard of Oz like everybody else did a million times. Heavily syndicated.
Mm-hmm.
This, I think maybe Josh will know a little bit about this where it existed kind of once it was done with theaters, but I didn't really know of its existence, I think, till probably I was well into adulthood.
Yeah, same. Neither of us were, I guess I'm speaking for you, but I don't think you were a Disney Channel person.
No,
we never had it growing up,
No, and not really a big Disney person.
Nor was I,
Yeah. This kind of determines your level of Disney
buy-in,
Yeah, this is like a what do they call that? A pay grade that I was not familiar with as far as the Disney world.
There were other ways into this movie, though. Max, when we first started talking about your memories of the film, you immediately spoke more broadly of movies of this era, which you weren't sure if they were movies you saw or nightmares you had. What do you think about even beginning to talk about Return to Oz might have sent your brain hurtling off in that direction?
Well, I think as we were talking last time, it suddenly came back to me about a memory of a woman being able to remove her face.
Uh-huh.
And now rewatching the movie now, I remember it's not her face, it's her entire head that comes off, which would be something that would stick with you as a child, but you wouldn't be sure if that was like a nightmare or something you actually saw. And there's some imagery that I think kind of lends itself to like a dream-like. That really happened? Like talking chickens,
sure,
talking rocks, that kind of stuff. So as I watched the movie, I got a lot of nostalgia hits of like, oh yeah, I remember that. Okay, I remember that. That was actually in the movie. Okay, so that was a neat trip.
So throwing to clip one here in a second. As a sort of preface to what you remembered of the film, you established your relationship to the L. Frank Baum books and the world of Oz in general.
When I was a kid, my grandmother bought me a book of The Wizard of Oz.
Sure.
And it's the book. So, like, not the movie.
Yeah, the L. Frank Baum. Yeah.
Yeah, the Frank L. Baum book, which is a classic. And the movie is not exactly the same as the book. Right. So it's a different plot and different stuff happens. And I loved the book. And the movie I saw, and I was like, it's not that great. And I was kind of like an early snob of like, oh, the movie's not like the book. Like
an early Oz purist. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I was like, oh, they really did Frank L. Baum wrong in this one.
Yeah.
So I didn't like the movie that much. But when they did the sequel, I was like all in on it for some reason. And I think it's based on other Baum writings, but I don't think I was aware of that. So, but anyway, I like being in that world.
So obviously you haven't probably read the books since your youth.
Well, let's not presume that.
Yeah.
I was a pretty big fan of him when I was a kid.
Yeah. Do you still feel like this was probably truer to Baum's vision than The Wizard of Oz of 39?
Yeah, because from what I know of the early 39 movie, like they wanted to show off Technicolor and made it really bright,
Yeah,
and it's a
and that's
musical
why they have the
number.
red slippers too. Yeah,
Right. Oh yeah, which they're silver in the book.
mm-hmm.
And they of course they had musical numbers. And
Mhm.
Dorothy is much older in that version. Judy Garland's like a
Yeah.
teenager or young adult.
Yeah, she's
In this
16.
movie, in this movie, she's I think they're the age she is in the book, which was like 10 or 11 years old. So that is a little truer. And then it's a more like drab, kind of gritty, realistic version of Kansas and Oz, which I think is a little more like the books. And the books I think are also kind of weird and kind of out there. And I think the 39 version of the movie downplays a little bit of that.
Yeah.
I mean, it gets a little freaky at times, but
flying monkeys. Yeah,
right. And there's only so much you can tone it down, but and I think this played into it, like kind of leaned into it more. So,
well, just Max, if you could just set the table a little bit. Were you aware of this movie before or after reading the books? And were you there for a theatrical screening of this, or did this come post 85 for you?
Yeah, it's hard to remember. At 85, I was 7, so I would guess I did not see it in the theater, and I would guess that I probably read the books a little later than that. And so, speaking of Disney Channel, I didn't have Disney Channel, but I had a friend that did have Disney Channel, and they watched it. That's pretty much all they were allowed to watch, oddly enough. And so, Josh, I think before I talked about, like, I remember making Lego, figures of these characters, and I was at that kid's house. So I'm almost certain I watched it on Disney Channel at his house, and then we played Legos. And so it's about the same time I read the books. I don't know which came first, but probably the books came first.
And that was a situation where things were presented on Disney Channel like, this is not a streamable world in the 80s. So you would have maybe just happened upon it, turned on the TV. What is this? Or it was like, hey, I've checked my TV guide. Return to Oz is coming up on Friday. Appointment viewing. This wasn't a video store retrieval for you, Max, was it?
I don't think so. I don't.
Okay.
It might have been something my parents picked out, and maybe we watched on VHS, but I don't recall exactly how I watched this the first time.
And were there multiple viewings of this?
I don't know. Maybe. If it was on Disney Channel, it probably ran on a loop, like every time.
So you would have had to go to this kid's house.
Yeah. And maybe we just caught it. It was on every day at 2:00, for a week or something like that.
Yeah. But I mean, you were motivated enough to play Legos based on the movie.
Yeah. I did like watching it. Like, okay, I remembered stuff from like, okay, I remember this now. Like, there's stuff. It wasn't like stuff like, this. I totally don't remember that. But
do you remember a specific Lego formation from Return to Oz?
Yeah, the gum creature that they throw together with the moose head
with
and the couch, and I remember making that out of Legos. And I think TikTok, the robot creature, I made him too. Yeah.
Do you think that having gotten the Oz book from your grandmother had any role in why you loved it so much?
Yeah, I think so. It was like kind of the first like non little kids book I think I read, like not like chapter book. And I read it like from cover to cover, and I loved it. So I'm sure, once you're kind of into that world, you're like, oh, I'll absorb anything that has to do with this,
Sure.
Even though, like I said, I don't know why the movie never really resonated with me. The 1939 movie.
Yeah.
Never really resonated with me as much as anything else.
Well, it wasn't pure to L. Frank Baum's vision.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I wasn't a big fan of musicals at that age, I guess.
It's funny. I do this thing also where the only reason I knew his name was L. Frank Baum and not Frank L. Baum is because I was looking at his name when we were talking. If I hadn't been looking at his name, I would have been completely certain that it was the other way.
You would have lost your money on it.
Yeah. So even like the author's name is like something that I jumble. But anyway, did you still really dig A Trip to Oz this time around?
I did. I was actually surprised how much I liked it. Like some of it was nostalgia. It's just like, oh, sure. I remember that. But I was expecting it to be a lot more bizarre and weirder than it was.
Yeah.
I don't know. I remember Never Ending Story and Dark Crystal, and I felt like those were really, really dark and kind of weird. And I was expecting this to be along those lines, and maybe it was for you guys, but for me, it seems a little more like truer to Wizard of Oz than those. But yeah, overall, it was a fun trip. And actually, I was not going to watch it with my 9-year-old because I didn't know
if it was going to
scary or weird it was going to be. And he walked in the middle of it, and he kind of was like, "What's this?" And really got kind of hooked into it and wanted to watch the whole thing. So,
did you start it over then?
No,
did you
no.
watch? Okay.
We watched a little bit, and then he was kind of time for bed. But we're going to watch it this week because he wants to see it.
Nice.
And he's a kid that kind of gets scared of things, but he wasn't. And he walked in at the part where the headless,
Wheelers?
the headless witch is chasing after Dorothy, which is like one of the freakiest parts. So he wasn't fazed by that.
Okay, right on.
I would say, Josh, I don't know what your takeaway was on that, but like I think the like legend and mythos of this being like a freak out may have been a bit overblown. Like there are some pretty surreal aspects of this, and I think if I'm, 6 or 7 watching this, expecting it to be Wizard of Oz, I'm going to be scared or disappointed. But
yeah, this is not a glowing version of Oz, and that's some of it, I think.
But I also don't think it was beyond the pale in terms of like, holy shit, this matches what I have heard about this movie. I think Return to Oz has this, notoriety to being like, oh, the freakiest thing that Disney's ever put out there. And there were some like sequences, that maybe if I'm a homeschooled kid, I'm going to get a little bit weirded out by. But by and large, I thought it was like creative and still within the realm of like, I don't know, a PG rating.
Yeah, I think the Wheelers were very much a step up from the Flying Monkeys, which were also like terrifying to young children. I think the Wheelers were like legit when that first fucking Wheeler pops up or like rolls through and he's got the like metal helmet showing instead of his face.
I think the helmets, right, are far scarier. Like it almost feels like they could have gone with that and we could have not seen this performative Cirque du Soleil. Those guys, correct me if I'm wrong, Max, those guys are also 2 of the orderlies, right?
Yes.
She's transposing those. Like, I thought one of those guys looked like Vladimir Putin, like a young Putin, like KGB Putin.
That's not terrifying?
No, that added a lot of worry to me. But had they just kind of kept their heads down, I would have thought, man, what a weird, almost like Silent Hill type of abstract way to scare, to be the kind of new monkeys, right? That's essentially what they are. But yeah, you're right. The first time that we see that Wheeler kind of creep around that ledge, I was like, holy shit, this could be pretty bad. And then they turn into like this, like edited out gang from the Warriors, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, they kind of become the comedic, like the punchline after that. Like they're kind of like the funny part of the movie.
They are, but like even when, I mean, they're to a point, like, it's fun to see them get their ass kicked by TikTok. I think they actually demonstrate, which is probably, I might change my answer as we talk about it, probably the most terrifying aspect of this entire thing, which is the deadly desert.
Yeah.
And we need the Wheelers to kind of showcase how that works.
Yeah, because 5 of them die? 5 or 6?
Yeah, pretty awfully to have your head kind of crack off into sand. I mean, that's pretty fucking rough for a kid's movie. But yeah, I mean, I think the Wheelers are a good introduction. I think that they lose a little bit of their fear when they kind of lift the masks up, their little helmets. And they
don't have a good fighting style either, because TikTok's only method of combat is spinning fists. So if you don't go within 2 feet of him,
right, you're
not going to get hit.
Yeah.
Like, they literally have to be approaching him to have what he's doing work. If they just stay away, they're totally okay.
I would also say probably as, the acting viewpoint here on this podcast is that it, to me, would be such a pain in the ass to be a Wheeler. I just thought chronic back pain the entire time.
Yeah.
I'm like, having to lean forward and lurch with your hands to stay horizontal
on 1 wheel apiece.
Oh my God, dude.
Like, was that surprising to you, Max, that they were just, because you'd thought they were on like skates, and no, they're on single wheels. Was that weird to you?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, again, it was one of those like, oh yeah, now I remember things. But yeah, the same thing occurred to me. Like, gosh, that must have been really hard to do several takes of that.
Yeah.
Especially the scenes where they're chasing after and tumbling down hills. I'm like, oh, that would have sucked.
I like that they're taggers too in Oz, right? Like we don't get that in Wizard of Oz that these guys are rolling around presumably with spray paint.
That's what's making you think they're from Warriors.
Well, they're just the way that they kind of talked and how they dressed. Like, obviously they're not like the main gang, but like they're one of those ones that we see in the subway kind of rolling through heading to the meeting that we don't get too much screen time of.
Yeah.
The Wheelers. And there was about 9 of them. I just think for a 9 or 10-year-old girl, right? Like Balk is in this.
She turned 10 during production.
Yeah, a bunch of like predatory men on wheels cornering you in a, whatever that was, a ravine. I mean, regardless of if they're on wheels or not, fucking scary.
Uh-huh.
But it was interesting, like the peril in this movie is like little kid peril, like, oh, scary things that are scary, but like there was no guns, no knives, no monsters really. It's just like freaky looking adults, a desert that turns you into sand. You know, it's like the stuff that like, it's not going to freak you out like some other movies I think I saw as a kid where like, you know, time bandits where like parents get exploded. You know, like that
I think the scariest thing, honestly, as an adult is the fucking electroshock.
Yeah. Which is real. The real.
That's the real world in this, not Oz. Whatever's going on in Oz. Like she is so tired from basically. I don't think it's PTSD necessarily, but she's so tired from being kept awake at night thinking of Oz that she can't work on the farm. She can't be put to work at 10. And so her fucking aunt, not even her mom, her goddamn aunt, who's her fucking legal guardian, is going to take her to the sanatorium.
Also, like, interesting casting on that, right?
Oh, yeah. Like the least sympathetic mom ever, Piper Laurie.
To have Piper Laurie come in as the authority figure. And Max, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong. We never heard Auntie M in this. In the book, is it Auntie or is it Aunt M?
I think she did refer to. I think she did refer to her as Auntie M in the movie.
I didn't hear Auntie.
She called her Aunt M, I believe.
Yeah, yeah. Because I noted the way she said it kind of weird. She
Yeah.
said like Auntie M or something like that. I do remember she said it, and I think it is Auntie M in the book too, but I couldn't be positive.
Okay.
But it was the implication that her uncle was a drunk, or because they the aunt said something like he's been fine for a while because he wasn't working on the house.
I suspect, so this is 6 months after the tornado, like, tears the house apart. So I think that it's probably more like a post-Vietnam PTSD thing.
Okay.
You know, like, I suspect that that's what's informing it, but I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, we never saw the dangers of drink.
Yeah, we don't see him drinking, at
That's
least.
true. I don't want to impugn him.
Yeah, we see him depressed and whatever.
And all it took was the near death of his niece to kind of, like, right the ship.
And build that house. Finish that build.
Which is a lesson to all children that if your dad or mom aren't doing well, like, endanger yourself.
Yeah, and then they'll finish the house. Yeah.
Yeah, then they'll come around.
Yeah, but just going back to the therapy, like that does kind of go into a familiar trope, or at least for me, like a recurring nightmare I had as a kid was like your parents leaving and like kind of not caring what happens, or like you get abandoned. Abandonment is like a common childhood nightmare.
Oh, so you saw
so, like,
American Tail?
The Auntie M like walking out the door of that sanatorium were pretty clear this is not a good situation. Like that really, I think it's really foreboding and really plays into like a lot of kids' fears.
Yeah. Now, you did mention that you thought Disney was in a weird place when this came out and that they'd been doing dark, scary stuff, which was somewhat puzzlingly meant for kids. After Walt Disney's death in 1966, they kind of made the switch to live action fare, with their animation department shrinking from 500 employees in 1970 to 125 by 1977. The 70s and early 80s saw them start to try to chase the blockbuster audience of Jaws and obviously more specifically Star Wars, hence The Black Hole, which you had mentioned. With non-Disney's running the company for the first time, the company started losing money annually, and by 1984, the major shareholders forced out the then CEO to install Michael Eisner, who'd been a president at Paramount. And Eisner appointed Jeffrey Katzenberg as chairman and Roy E. Disney, the, I believe, son of Roy Disney, Walt's brother, as the head of the animation division, which he wanted to produce a feature every 18 months instead of... This is Eisner. 18 months instead of every 4 years. The first animated feature under his tenure was the wildly expensive Baum, The Black Cauldron.
I don't remember that.
Which was PG rated. Well, they fucking shelved it until you couldn't get it on home video until 1998. So 13 years later, they finally released it. But it was so dark that in the initial test screenings, there were tons of sequences that were deemed too intense for kids. And so there had to be a lot of rewriting done They cut 12 minutes, a fair amount of which was related to it being too dark and intense for kids. It cost $40 million and was a total bomb.
The Black Cauldron?
Yeah, it earned the nickname the film that almost killed Disney.
It's animated?
Yes, it's animated.
40 million.
40 million animated. Jesus. So yes, Disney was in a very weird place because that came out the same year as Return to Oz. It was in a very weird place when development began on this in 1980. This was in development for like 4 years before it went into production. So weird times. Yeah, we'll see if Disney ends up back there. Now, watching this now, do you think that your suspicion that young Max, who would have been roughly the same age, had a crush on Fairuza Balk was correct?
Yeah, either her or the Ozma, the other young girl.
Yeah,
one of them probably. I don't know, but yeah, that was I think her first acting role, was it not?
It's her first feature. She had some TV movie roles because she auditioned out of Vancouver, so she had been doing some acting, but this was her like big first role.
Yeah, that makes sense. She did a great job. I mean, think about how hard she has to carry this movie, and she's in like every scene, and she does a pretty good job. I don't feel like like some child actors are pretty bad.
Oh yeah,
I think she held her own okay.
Are you yang that some child actors are pretty bad, Sean?
Yes. Yeah, and we talk about on this podcast a lot about how you live or die by the kid actors. And I agree with Max. I think that Fairuza really comports herself well. Mm-hmm. She's kind of doing an impossible job here, right? She's Dorothy Gale.
Yeah.
She's coming in here like, a new Hannibal Lecter or a new Joker, where you're like, you can't do it again because someone's already done it perfectly. And yeah, she's kind of playing this younger version. I wonder a lot too if they had just set this with a similar aged Dorothy, if it actually would have done a lot better.
I think it kind of would have, but
even though it's against the books, right? Mm-hmm. Like as Max said, she's younger in the books. But if you give people the connection that like, hey, this is Dorothy from 39 and all the shit that she went through, and now we're picking up, it's very, very rare to have a sequel.
Well, and Murch didn't view it as a sequel, which is also weird. Walter Murch, the director, and he got this ball rolling because Disney owned the rights.
Honestly, it doesn't fucking matter what Murch intended.
Oh, I know. It's viewed as a sequel, absolutely.
What we get 6 months after the tornado. Mm-hmm. That's what we get early on. She's been to Oz. No one believes her. Like, we need to have, sorry, Fairuza, I think you're great, but we need to have a 16-year-old girl in that part.
I found it very distracting that she was, wait, what? While I was watching, I had to be like, wait, okay, so how old was Judy Garland when she shot this? Was she 14 or something? And like, no, she was 16. She was 16.
She was 16, but she's also Judy Garland, right?
She comported herself like she was older than 16 when she was 16. Yeah.
And most people did in the 30s. I mean, she had gone through, basically, Judy Garland probably went through a much harder version of like the Disney labs than what kids go through, the last 20 years. She was in enunciation classes and like finishing schools and dance and my God, singing classes. So by the time she does Wizard of Oz at 16, she's coming out of that thing with the precociousness of somebody in their late 20s.
Well, I mean, she's shortly thereafter basically fully addicted to substances, and like Hollywood chewed up and spit out Judy Garland. Like it really fucked her over.
Right, but I mean, after Wizard, we have Star is Born. We have Spirit of St. Louis. We have the shit that she did with Andy. Is it Rooney? Who's the guy? The
Mickey Rooney. I wish it was Andy Rooney.
I know. He'd have a lot of gripes about her drug use.
Yeah.
I guess. Another thing that bothers me is when people crush up pills. But I mean, that's like my one kind of, I think, a just an unfair thing that kind of happened with Fairuza is that she...
Yeah, it's not on her, but it's very distracting to me.
She kind of crushes this in this role, and it's almost a no-win situation for her.
Well, I think that's what people were expecting when they signed up to watch this movie, is they were expecting a sequel to the 39 version.
Sure.
It was bright and had musical numbers, and it's the thing they remembered. And this was different. They made the Scarecrow, Tin Man, and Lion, who appeared in this, look very different than they do in the original version. They're not human actors, they're special effects. But interestingly, they do have a nod to the 39 version by having the ruby red slippers, which are not in the book. And actually, Disney paid, I looked this up after the movie, they paid a lot of money to have the rights to use those ruby red slippers.
Because MGM owned the rights to they didn't use the same slippers, but right. MGM owned the conceptual IP of the ruby red slippers, and had to. So
they're going to spend a lot of money to have that throwback, but not have the throwback of 16-year-old Dorothy and all these other things.
I feel like that's probably a creative concession where they're like, guys, we have to have some tie-in here. We have to have something that's going to bring people into that world of 39. And I don't care what it costs. Let's just get it done.
Yeah, because he was the Gnome King, which we'll get to eventually. He was supposed to have had a belt that was his garment that gave him power or whatever. Oh, Balk, by the way, was especially the scenes where they're shooting in Kansas. It was freezing. It was freezing temperatures, and she was crying and not saying anything, not complaining, but crying because she was so fucking cold.
Did they shoot in Kansas, or was it
No, they shot all of this in the UK.
Okay, that makes sense.
The producer they brought in, they fired the original producer and during pre-production and brought in another producer who's slashed the budget, and Disney wouldn't let him go on location. Murch wanted to shoot in Algeria and Italy. And they put the kibosh on that and made them shoot everything at Elstree in the UK. Yeah,
I think the scene where she kind of comes to, laying in the mud next to the river, I was like, I hope she wasn't there for long. I mean, there's no ferny pad. It is a river. She's just got to wait for Toto, her co-star, to kind of come up and save her. There's something though that Max said, which these new friends of hers, and one of the reasons why, again, I feel Return to Oz falters is that you have very humanistic friends in Wizard of Oz. You see their faces. We don't see any faces here, right?
Yeah.
They're only the bad people, really, that we see. But her friends, TikTok, Belina,
Jack Pumpkinhead, and the Gump from the forest.
None of them have a relatable face where we can see them being even happy, because they don't have the characterization in their faces to show fear or happiness.
Yeah, I did want to ask you guys, what did you think of the special effects? Because what kind of struck me is some of them look really pretty impressive for 1985.
The Gnome King stuff looked good, but the animated rocks looked fucking terrible.
So I guess that was the same company that did the California Raisins.
Shout out Will Vinton.
Well, then, yeah.
But yeah, I think it's a little inconsistent. I do think the heads work really well.
Yeah.
I find it funny sometimes. This happens a lot in movies where suddenly they're British.
About that, the fucking actress Emma Ridley, who was playing Princess Ozma, they dubbed her over with a less British voice. It's not her voice at all.
She feels really ADR'd. She really does.
She is entirely. It's Murch's niece or something who
but,
is the voice.
We're filming this in London. They're probably local hires.
Absolutely.
Right? So we're getting, especially at the end when those heads kind of are back in their normal spot. I found it. I was oh, okay, yeah, we're hiring all Brits here.
Yeah. So, Max, you started describing this insane plot as follows. And this is just the first part.
So what I remember is that Dorothy comes back to Oz, is summoned, or is people from Oz will be come back, Dorothy, we need you.
Okay.
So she goes back to Oz. I have a very clear memory of what Oz looks like when she comes back, and it's very dystopian, cracked sidewalks, trees with no leaves, no one's around, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. I remember that she met 3 characters who are very much parallels to the Lion, Tin Man, and Scarecrow from the original.
Sure.
I remember the Tin Man parallel was a robot of some sort.
Okay.
Yeah. This is written by people on crack, I know.
Sure. Yeah, it's the 80s. Yeah.
I think the Scarecrow parallel was like a couch with a taxidermy moose attached to it, and then like fern. This sounds insane describing it, but fern leaves as like the wings. It can fly.
Okay,
and
this is gold.
Yeah, like something like that. And I think he was like I know the Scarecrow wanted a brain. This creature wanted life. I think that was the whole thing. Is like these creatures wanted like the gift of life or something like that.
Okay.
And I don't remember what the parallel to the lion was. If it was another animal or what. But I know there was like 3 parallel, like there was exactly the same as like the original, but just like these are updated versions of the 3 characters she hangs out with.
So, do you think that this decrepit, rundown Oz was a thing that drew your younger self in?
Maybe. Yeah, it's a different look of Oz. And so just to clarify, like that's the parallels I got a little bit wrong. The Scarecrow parallel is Jack Pumpkinhead, who is a pumpkin head on a scarecrow's body, which is very similar.
Creative
and then
name.
the lion's parallel is Gump, the taxidermy moose on the couch.
And then, of course, Belina is our Toto.
Yeah. Which, even though Toto's in the movie, but he's replaced by a chicken.
Toto doesn't make it to Oz, though.
Yeah, and Belina was just there for exposition, I think, just to have someone to talk to.
Yeah.
And kind of like a Jar Jar Binks figure to crack egg jokes and chicken jokes.
Who probably shat over that entire movie. I mean, it was kind of interesting how often they're using a real chicken.
Under her arm.
Under her arm.
They've got a 10-year-old lugging 40 fucking chickens around on set. Which is crazy to me.
What's the 40?
There were 40 different chickens they used.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Yeah, just think of this shit, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can kind of, with the original Toto, I mean, that thing can probably be housebroken and you can kind of figure it out. A chicken is not going to figure it out.
No.
So, as it's being hoisted, I mean, there were times where I was like, wait, that is a real chicken. And, like, Fairuza Balk is, like, very comfortable with it.
She loved the chickens, apparently.
Just picking those things up. And the chickens probably loved her because that's, they like somebody who's in charge when being handled, but as anybody does. But holy shit, man. Like costuming and sets and continuity. Chicken shit. Probably everywhere.
Now, were you surprised that your memory of the Gump was pretty spot on? Because it sounded insane.
And I think that was like the thing. One of the things that stood out to me, it was endearing the most. Like I said, I remember making Lego characters of him. He's kind of funny, I guess, and it's just a character I think you would remember.
Yeah.
I guess I was wrong about the whole life being the big theme, but the powder of life, I guess, was a major plot element.
Yeah, that's probably where you got that jumbled up, yeah.
Yeah, you sprinkle it on things, they come alive, which it seems like they could have done a little bit more with that, but...
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because that's like a big deal, and she just locked away in a cabinet.
Yeah. So. Are you surprised you didn't remember Belina?
Yeah, I don't know, talking chicken is pretty common in kids' stories. But I'm a little surprised I didn't remember that. I'm a little surprised I didn't remember the lunch tree. The lunch tree is kind of an interesting... That would be something you'd remember as a kid, I think.
We don't get too much of that, unfortunately.
Yeah, they need to go back to the lunch tree. Like, she needs to eat at the lunch tree every day. We need to see her take her lunch at the lunch pail tree.
I'm curious what kind of lunches we can get. Like, can I get sushi, or is it only sandwiches, or what kind of variety?
Yeah, I'd be afraid.
What kind of things are going to keep hanging off of that?
Didn't she? What was in the lunch pail? Was it like I don't remember. Was it a ham sandwich? Yeah. So this tree serves deli meat, I guess. Yeah. How did the situation Dorothy found herself in at the sanatorium play to you? Did you recall? Like, was it surprising because you didn't? Not to say you needed to have remembered it in the sort of like plot summary, but you didn't recall that.
No, yeah, I forgot the entire setup. So I watched the very beginning with my wife. Who'd never seen this before, and she remarked during those scenes and she's in the medical industry. It's like that hospital's weird and creepy. And she thought the whole sequence was very weird and slow. She thought she found the beginning very slow, which it is a little bit. It takes some time to get going. I'm surprised I didn't remember that because that would have probably been kind of not super scary, but like, again, the abandonment issues and, you know, anytime kids don't like going to the doctor, especially a doctor that has an electroshock therapy machine that looks like a face. So
yeah.
Now you gotta spend the night at the doctor's.
When he said that
Wayland's
looked like a
faces.
face, I thought it was nuts. Like, he is crazy if he thinks that looked like a face. But he needs to electroshock himself.
That becomes TikTok, right? Like in her
kind of, yeah. The
world.
machinations. That's the how we're meant to draw that parallel. I think
that's the proxy.
And the doctor is the Gnome King, which I didn't know until I looked up the cast afterwards.
Yeah, same.
He's the Gnome King, yeah.
I was like, oh,
I only knew that because of the voice, Nigel Terry's voice, having grown up with the movie Excalibur, where he played Merlin. His voice.
Wait, I thought it was Nicole.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, Nicole Williamson or Nicole.
Nigel Terry was Arthur in that. Yeah. I get those guys mixed up. Yeah, Nicole Williamson, but he's got that voice, you know, that we hear it as the. Yeah, it's so Merlin. I mean, thank God we didn't get like Balk being zapped. I think like that would have like pushed it over the edge.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, Jesus, it was as close as it's gonna get, right? Like they have to lose power. For
the place burns down in this storm.
I also am not look, I'm not in the medical field, but I don't think you should be putting the electrodes on the kids' eardrums, right? Like they look like your headphones, Josh.
Yeah.
And like I thought, you know,
forehead,
from what I
temple.
know, forehead.
Where's the petroleum jelly too to make sure you don't burn the skin?
You're gonna that kid's gonna be deaf. You're gonna rock her eardrums, and like the thing that I think really kind of makes that sanitarium so spooky is the screams that we hear.
Yeah,
they're grown men, right?
Echoing from the bowels of the fucking sanatorium. You know,
they are grown
during a
male
thunderstorm
screams. This is not a children's hospital, right? She's probably like one of the only kids there. It seems like that advertisement that they read was like for a lot of different types of patients.
None of whom are a 10-year-old girl.
None of whom are
who can't be put to work on the farm.
Except for the Phantom. What I'm wondering is, do we... Okay, so Ozma, right?
Mm-hmm.
If her proxy is in the sanitarium, is she real in that version or no? Because she can kind of go back and forth between doors, right? She can go through doors.
I think this movie, like the 39 version, has a little bit of ambiguity. Did all this stuff happen, or is this all in this girl's head while she was passed out from some traumatic event? And so, I don't know. Like, I think Ozma is supposed to be her, because she says, "I wish I could be in two places at once." Yeah, and it's like, well, you can, but it's Ozma who doesn't look like her. So that was a little confusing. Like, is she supposed to be like a proxy, or like what is she exactly? And did this even all happen? Like, is it still just a figment of imagination of a little girl?
I couldn't tell if, who's the woman who plays Mombi, whatever her name is.
Well, the Nurse Wilson version, or
the Nurse Ratchet. If she could see Ozma in that scene when they're escaping, like she comes out of the cellar and she sees the girls, it kind of feels like she saw Ozma there. But again, it could lead to the ambiguity of it.
So how do you feel about your memory in total regarding her traveling companions in Oz, Max?
So they're pretty derivative, which I think is true to the original writing. So these are based on other writings of L. Frank Baum, which I read was because he staged a movie and theater version of Wizard of Oz and lost so much money that he needed to write sequels to recoup the money. And so this is where a lot of this comes from. So they're a little derivative, but I think people like familiar patterns. I mean, just look at the new Star Wars trilogy for derivative, characters and plots.
Episode 7 is exactly episode 4. Yeah.
Right. And people like that to an extent, I think. So the characters, I like TikTok. I think they were kind of creative with that about him winding down. That was a nice plot device.
It's like the first robot in literature, because it was written. That was written.
Yeah. So,
or at least per the Wikipedia page.
Okay.
Could be interesting. Could be lie. I don't
know. Yeah. She meets the other ones kind of late in the story, so you don't get to see like Jack Pumpkinhead. The whole mom bit was kind of like kind of funny, I guess, but kind of
It's also weird calling a fucking 10-year-old girl mom.
Yeah.
Jackie had a problem with that.
So, and then I guess that also runs into the theory that she's a proxy for Ozma because Ozma is her mom, and he keeps thinking that it's Dorothy. And then the gum, I think, is just a device to be able to fly out of there.
Yeah.
So they're not fully fleshed out like maybe as much as the 39 version, where you have 3 characters that have 3 goals, because we don't really know what any of these characters really wants or needs.
Right.
But to further her story along, that's I think it's fine.
So you went on to speak about the antagonists. Throw to that clip here.
I do remember that instead of winged monkeys that terrified kids in the original movie, this version had, I think it was men with their rollerblading was really popular back then, and they were on roller skates with like roller skate arms. Like they're on all fours like a dog.
Whoa.
And and on all 4 appendages they had roller skates, roller blades.
Yeah.
And I think that's what terrified a lot of kids back in the day.
Okay.
So that was like the bad guy. I don't remember who the like ultimate bad guy. I know the original had the Wicked Witch of the West. She obviously died in the first one. I have no idea who the bad guy in the second one was.
Nice.
So I can't tell you what the internal conflict or like, the battle for this movie was.
How do you feel about your recollection of the Wheelers?
Pretty good. I think I mostly remembered them, and it's interesting that they stand out so much more than the Gnome King, who was the ultimate bad guy, or even Mondi, who I remembered the head changing things, but I didn't really remember if she was a good guy or bad guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, it suffers. The movie suffers a little bit, but you don't see the Gnome King until 2/3 of the movie's done.
Mm-hmm.
And
maybe even longer, honestly. It feels like a very long time.
And he's changing his appearance all the time, so you don't really know what he looks like until
he sounded like if you know this name, hit us up in the comments. The big face in Tron.
Yeah.
Whoever that is, the AI basically of Tron, and again we're coming out a few years after that. It felt like there were some other things that were borrowed, I guess, in how they interpreted the bad guys. I think like the problem with the Gnome King is his ambiguity as to whether or not he's a good guy or a bad guy for most of the movie. Mm-hmm. It even feels like he's kind of on her side for, I don't know, most of it. Teasing her and then are making this arrangement. He does feel very much like a wizard who is like, I'm going to kind of represent an enemy or some kind of hindrance to you, and then you're gonna win me over. And it's kind of the opposite here in Return to Oz.
Yeah, he pulls the rug out from under. Are you surprised that you didn't really remember the Gnome King?
I mean, watching it now, no, because you don't see him, and then the motivation itself is kind of flimsy. Like he wants the emeralds back from Emerald City.
Yeah, they're his because he's. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like okay, that's. I mean, so what I kind
of wait, and that's the big code that she cracks is that her friends are emerald colored. So like holy shit!
Yeah, anyone from Oz was turned into an emerald ornament.
I do like how that scene reminded me a lot of Last Crusade in choosing the proper grail, but at least there had to have been some better logic that Indy does, where it's like, no, Jesus was a fucking carpenter. He's going to have the shittiest cup here. Yeah. Instead, it was just, oh, they're green. Oh, no shit, Dorothy.
When I saw that, so when he kind of sets up the game, I immediately was like, oh yeah, I remember she has to find the trinket. And in my mind, I'm thinking like you. I was like, okay, Last Crusade, there's kind of it's counterintuitive, right? There's going to be some counterintuitive. Nope, just they're green. Look for green. Yep. Like, okay, I forgot it was that simple.
So you recalled likely seeing this on the Disney Channel and following it up with a rollicking good time playing with Legos that you crafted to be the Forrest Gump and TikTok. Did this make you bust out the Legos all over again?
I did not, but okay. I may have to do that though this week. That sounds like a good time.
Are you still in touch with that friend?
No,
you can't play Legos together.
No, I don't even know if he has Disney Channel anymore.
Okay, what a bummer.
Why be friends with him?
Yeah, exactly.
Now, for the next clip, you recalled an icy reception when you told others that you liked Return to Oz.
If I recall correctly, the movie did not do, I don't know if it was released in theaters, I don't know, but it did not do well. I don't think it was well received at the time, because I kind of remember being like one of the only people that liked the movie. I was like, oh, this is a great movie. And other people were like, no, it's not a good movie.
Sure. So you were getting pushback as a kid. Like, no.
Yeah, it was weird, creepy. I wouldn't be surprised to find out, I have no idea who made it. I wouldn't be surprised to find out like Tim Burton had a big hand in it. Or like someone that, because like it seemed very kind of creepy. Like, and that's kind of why I liked it. I think it's because it was kind of creepy. It was kind of weird. It didn't seem Disney at all. It seemed very like, oh, this is some weird stuff. Like, this isn't a kid's movie. And I think that's kind of what drew me to it a little bit.
All right. So you felt like you were in the minority in liking this movie back then and wondered if it had even gotten a theatrical release. Well, it had a $28 million budget per the New York Times and made just $11 million at the box office, with the Times guessing it could have lost as much as $29 million, as they didn't seem to be including the $6 million on prints and advertising in the budget, and the distributor only got a little under half of the box office revenues then. It finished 81st at the year-end box office in 1985, behind Perfect, Young Sherlock Holmes, Life Force beat it out, where a character is walking around nude the entire movie. And Just One of the Guys. It just beat out Crush Groove, Gotcha, American Ninja, and Better Off Dead. Most of these films that finished around it did not cost $28 million. Having seen this just now, is it surprising to you that it lost that much money?
No, because like I said, I think people were expecting one thing and it delivered something else. And I think, and afterwards I did read that, like you mentioned, the Disney management changeover, Michael Eisner had like no interest in promoting this movie.
Yeah.
Not that would have helped necessarily. Like,
sure. But this was the previous regime. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if that would have helped. Like, you know, it's different than the 39 version. So I don't know if that would have made a difference, but yeah, it seems like one of those kind of acquired tastes, like, where it's much more drab and much more gritty than the old version. So it doesn't surprise me that it didn't find a receptive audience.
Josh, if they had figured out a way to get like maybe a bare brush shot, like Just One of the Guys in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it probably would have done much better.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that maybe that's...
Matilda May walking around naked as an alien.
Well,
yeah. I mean, yeah.
Which is
helps.
very memorable.
Yeah.
But like, let's say Princess Mombi, instead of heads, just has bosoms that she interchanges.
Oh, that would be... Yeah.
I mean, talk about a big swing.
So I'm guessing the budget all went towards special effects because it's set. They filmed it in the UK, I guess. What I did note is I thought Oz, the set, looked
that looked expensive.
Cheap.
Yeah.
Well, I know I thought it looked cheap. There wasn't anything around it.
I thought that the room with the heads, and the interiors in Oz looked expensive. Yeah.
But a lot of the movie is set in there. Like most of the movie is set in there. And then the exterior of Oz looked just like any kind of rundown building. So I thought that was kind of cheapy, but I mean, the special effects, I guess, probably cost a good amount.
The claymation shit surely cost a ton. Now, you wondered if Tim Burton had worked on this. Do you think you might have made a subconscious connection between Jack Pumpkinhead and Jack Skellington from The Nightmare Before Christmas?
I'm sure that was probably it. Yeah.
Okay.
Because Tim Burton did not, from what I understand.
No, he didn't, but he did nod to Jack Pumpkinhead as like an inspiration for Nightmare Before Christmas. So he was inspired, or he wasn't influenced by it at least.
This is about an $85 million budget today.
Yes. The $28 million translates to about 83, which is
CGI chicken
nuts.
Instead of real chicken crapping all over the place.
Which, to use like kind of a current movie, would get you like a Bullet Train with Brad Pitt, or even like Elvis was around that.
Oh, God.
Yeah, we hopefully will never talk about that.
No.
But
I will never let that happen.
It's a lot of money. I mean, I thought like some of the ways that they are saving money is with the rear projection shit.
And matte painting the
Yeah, they're matte painting some stuff. They're using the rear projection. But then they go and do that fucking final 20 minutes or 10 minutes.
Which has to be so expensive.
You have, 200 people there?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a small cast up to that point. Like, it's
and then it
small
just
cast.
explodes. There's so much. It's so opulent.
It
like
goes
everything
full-
costs so much then.
It goes full Great Gatsby. In that last 15 minutes. It's like, and shout out to all the little people actors. As I've said, the 80s is the golden age for little people actors. And they got fucked when computers figured out how to make things shorter. But we get a lot of them in that scene. We get a lot of people, like good-looking Brits in like original costume designs in that scene. Everything is ramped to 1,000 in that scene.
Yeah.
Which leads me to this weird issue I have with the kind of crux of the movie, which is like, why go back? Why should Dorothy go back? She says she has to go back, but...
Because the key was sent in a falling star, Sean. That's why.
Okay, great. And now she's got the key, but she has a PTSD uncle who doesn't really give a shit about her. She has a aunt who abandons her at a sanitarium. I mean, granted, there might be some love for the dog, but she's got Belina and the rest to make up for that. There's no real urgency to go back because it doesn't feel like in the original where she loved these people around the farm and she wants to return. There's no place like home. Home is a fucking shithole post-tornado. Nobody should go back. In Oz, she's surrounded by friends. She's crying her eyes out, having to say goodbye to them. Don't go home, and maybe don't wake up. Maybe you're dead, back home.
No, I think it's a real point. Like, there's no reason for her to go back. And really, her problem is not solved necessarily. Like, is she sleeping better now that she can see Ozma in the mirror?
We don't really know.
Yeah, we don't know.
We never get any resolution to that.
How do you not fucking end the movie with Dorothy sleeping soundly?
Right.
Yeah.
What a fucking missed opportunity there.
Do you feel at all vindicated that this does enjoy something of a cult status amongst some of the more disturbed members of our generation? Or that Neil Gaiman thinks that this is one of the, quote, very best fantasy films he's ever seen?
Oh, okay. Good company. I think it's actually pretty good. I would, like I said, my kid wanted to watch it, and there's, like John just said, there's not really a reason for this movie to exist other than Frank Baum had to pay out debts. But it's not like the Wicked Witch comes back or her, her cabal comes back for vengeance or anything. It's like a new enemy that has a new whipped up problem, and there's no real reason for her to go to Oz other than we just created a new problem for her.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I think is like, we need to try something. It's the 80s. DreamWorks is fucking pushing us. Who was the other big one?
Well, DreamWorks hadn't been founded yet because Katzenberg's at Disney here.
So who's doing American Tail?
Oh, that was Bluth.
Bluth, right?
Bluth were the guys who they left Disney in the 70s
or
early 80s.
Bluth is beating the shit out of us, right? Don Bluth is beating the shit out of us here.
Yeah, and American Tail, Land Before Time, both drubbing them.
This is the weird pre-Renaissance Disney era where we just gotta try everything and see what sticks.
Yeah, I mean, this is still 4 years from Little Mermaid.
Exactly.
And I guess the Disney had wanted to do Wizard of Oz since, Walt started doing movies, and he wanted to do that. He wanted to do this first, but they couldn't, I guess, secure the rights, and so they ended up doing Snow White instead. But it had long been, and it seems like a good match, like in theory. Sure. So I don't know. I think that the fantasy elements, I think, are pretty good. It's not like the greatest kids movie ever, but I think it held up pretty well compared to what I was expecting, I guess.
Sure. So you were a child who was averse to scary things. You just watched this. How did this not scare young, easily frightened Max?
He wasn't as scary as I thought. I guess it was like the headless witch is a little scary, but I mean, you don't see blood. You don't see, it's just she doesn't have a head, and that's I don't know. It's kind of funny in some context. And then other than that, there's not a lot of peril. Like I said, it's just not a lot of. There's no monsters really.
In real life, her legal guardian takes her to get electroshock. Like, that's real. That's like in the real world. The person who's supposed to care for her is like, you're not fucking working.
Yeah.
You just stay up all night thinking about Oz. We're going to fucking send you to the nut house. That is such like a crazy real world existential threat to Dorothy that I don't know. I think that is the hospital shit. It's so shocking to see in a kid's movie. Like, we're going to send this kid off to get fucking electroshock is batshit.
And what happens is They lose the kid. The kid goes in a fucking river.
Yeah.
And then the place burns down. Like,
but she goes to jail for what charges? I don't know. Like, what do you?
Yeah.
well, I mean, Jesus Christ, child endangerment for one. But like, yeah, what happens is they come back and the place is burned to the ground.
In cinders.
The doctor died.
Yeah, the doctor died trying to save TikTok.
There's no way that the screaming men in the basement did not die as well. Like, we don't count them because they weren't officially.
They said the doctor was the only one who was killed, but I think you're right. They don't count.
They're not on the docket, right?
No.
This is all like
they're off the books.
Yeah, this is like where you take like your mentally handicapped Kennedy, right? Like you just bring your rich relative that you don't want the family to know about to the sanitarium. They stay off the books, and then they all burn to death in the basement. That's what's happening here. And you're right. Princess Mombi, Nurse Mombi, is in the paddy wagon at the end of this, right?
Yeah.
Well, you don't go in the paddy wagon because your fucking hospital burns down.
No.
You go in the paddy wagon because you're endangering the life of a 10-year-old.
And torturing people. Being complicit in the torture of all of these patients.
Well, yeah, but how do they know that unless there's tons of, chained up bodies in the basement?
Probably chained up bodies in the basement, yeah. You remembered sentience being a thing these inanimate objects wanted that humans had being a theme of the film. How do you feel about that now?
Yeah, I must have just confused the powder of life being having a big.
Well, you had mentioned that they wanted life also, like sentience or life or something. Yeah, but
so that's the kind of one of the, I guess, flaws of those movies, that we don't know what any of those secondary characters wants. I think TikTok wants someone to guard, maybe, but then Jack Pumpkinhead or Pumpkin.
Jack Pumpkinhead.
Jack Pumpkinhead.
Yeah.
I guess wanted his mom. We don't know what he really wanted.
Yeah, their motivations aren't very clear to me.
Well, and it's not really clear why he's in the movie. Like, other than as a parallel, like he doesn't really do much other than I guess he almost gets eaten at the end.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's just more color to add to the palette.
Yeah.
Well, she gets brought a pumpkin by Ozma, right? And she is the mother of that pumpkin while in that room temporarily.
But it still seems thin.
It's very thin.
Yeah. So, last clip, I asked what your expectations were for your return to Oz, and you said...
Yeah, that's, I don't know what to expect. I'm expecting it to be kind of creepy and kind of weird. And, I expect to be questioning decisions made by the director. But I don't know. I mean, there's going to be some, I'm sure it'll come back to me. The characters will be like, oh, yeah, I remember that. The characters are the cool. Like, I remember the characters, like, they were creative in the characters, I thought. And they're kind of a little derivative of the original, but, like, they came up with new characters that were kind of, I guess, endearing to me. And like the bad guy, the rollerblading bad guys were kind of to me at the time, like a fresh, like, oh my God, that's terrifying. Like not flying monkeys kind of bad guy. So I don't know. It could be good. I guess it's not. I see a lot of movies people have nostalgia about. I've never seen anyone have nostalgia about this one. So I don't know what to expect.
Okay. So did you find the new characters interesting and creative as an adult?
Probably not as interesting and creative as I did as a kid. Like I said, they're pretty derivative, and they're not as full fleshed out as maybe the originals, but they're different. I mean, they could have done some stupid, I guess, and with some of these characters. And like I said, I think TikTok, I think really stands out as like a good character.
Yeah.
But also like, number one, I'm wondering how they did that special effect. Is that like a little person in a...
It's a fucking acrobat in there who's standing on his hands.
Really?
He's standing on his hands with his legs scrunched up. The thing was so fucking hot. When they close him in there, he had 2.5 minutes to shoot whatever they were going to shoot, and then they had to fucking crack that thing back open.
That's terrible.
Yeah. Sounds horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of, granted how hard that must have been, and the Wheelers as well. Like, there's a lot of fucking physical toll that this movie...
Yeah, this ruined lives.
Exacted. I mean, even Balk gets tossed around a lot.
She's doing her own stunts. Like, what the fuck was with the 80s and letting kids do stunts? Like, are you fucking kidding me? That could have shut down production. They only had fucking 3.5 hours with her every day anyway. And she's in like every scene. There's a reason this movie was like having big budget issues. You don't have a kid this young in the movie. Have this person be 16, or you have the character be 16. You have a young-looking 18-year-old who can work fucking a normal amount of time, 3.5 hours a day, and she's in, like, I don't know, it feels like 98% of the film. Did the Wheelers play against your memory of them as terrifying? Or how did they play against your memory of them as being terrifying?
Yeah, they seemed sillier as an adult. I like Sean said, like when you first see them and you see the cap with the face on it, that seems initially terrifying. And when there's a horde of them, I guess, coming down, like at first you're like, oh my gosh. But then they get pretty silly pretty quickly, I think. And I think it's kind of some kind of overacting, probably intentionally so by the main Wheeler.
Sure.
Where he's kind of playing a goofy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you want to be too scary for a little kid.
Yeah, there was probably a note like, play this a little broad.
Right. Yeah, they're kind of clownish. And then it's pretty clear that they're pretty subservient to Mondi. And
yeah,
she's just their, I guess, servants. So yeah, it wasn't as scary as I thought it would be. And it didn't seem to scare my 9-year-old.
Okay. Now, I do follow people on Letterboxd who hold a great deal of nostalgia for this film. Do you wonder if you've maybe just fallen in with the wrong crowd?
I actually asked, so I told people I was doing this, and I asked around that they watched it, or if they even heard of it, and no one I knew had heard of this movie. Like they're like, oh, there's a sequel. So somehow it escaped many people's consciousness.
And it's on Disney. Everyone has Disney Plus, it feels. It is there for anyone to watch.
It was on Disney Plus. Yeah, it's right there if anyone wants to find it, available for streaming.
So the lack of collective nostalgia had you worried that maybe your childhood enjoyment of the film would be doused. How do you feel about those concerns with a rewatch in the rearview mirror?
Yeah, now I just feel like it was an acquired taste that maybe it takes a certain intellect to appreciate.
Sure, yeah.
No, but I do think reading the books as a kid was a big part of why I enjoyed it. I think obviously most people didn't read the books. They're basing their opinion off the 1939 version, which is great too. But this is not.
But that didn't click with you.
Yeah, but this sequel is just not going to be in line with that. So I get why it's not a commercially mainstream success or anything like that.
So I followed up with you and asked you if you were a contrarian to be a contrarian, or if you were just ahead of your time and you just got this before everyone else did. You thought that you were probably priding yourself on being smarter than other kids and liking its hewing closer to Baum's vision with a fresh viewing under your belt. Do you now think that young Max was onto something?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know. I'm a stick to the books kind of guy.
Sure,
but there's a room in this world for both visions. Like the 39 version's great, and it's held up to this test of time. But I think there's also a place for like a more, adhering to the books fantasy world where it's a little weird. And I mean, there's more books that they ever want to make a third movie.
They made that Franco one that no one watched.
Yeah, oh, that's true. I forgot about that one. Yeah, no one saw it.
I've never seen it.
Yeah.
I can't even remember what the fuck it was called.
I have no idea. I never saw it. I have no idea what it's about.
That Sean can't recall it either. This is damning of whatever.
I want to say it was called something Oz,
powerful,
like the
Oz.
Great and Powerful
Great and
Oz.
Powerful Oz. Yeah, I think that's right. But is it about? It's a prequel about Oz. I don't.
It's the wizard before. I think it's the kind of genesis of Oz.
How he got to
It's Wonka. It's Wonka.
Yeah. Okay. So that makes sense.
Without Chalamet, without somebody who's been Me Too'd to out of work.
So you were excited to see how messed up Return to Oz was. Were your hopes for a weird ride met?
No, it wasn't as weird as I thought. Now I'm wondering if I should go back and watch other like Neverending Story and like Dark Crystal just to make sure.
Well, don't watch them too soon. Wait for the podcast. Wait for when we come back.
Sure.
Yeah.
But your imagination takes off as a kid. You misinterpret and misunderstand things. So
sure.
It's possible like the electrotherapy stuff just went over my head as a kid. Like maybe I didn't understand what they were doing. Like, oh, she's just going to the doctor. What's the big deal? I don't know. Like in some of the stuff, obviously I misremembered, and I may have confused things for nightmares that I actually did.
Sure. So picking up the scraps, is there anything we've missed that anyone wants to talk about?
Did this cast go? I mean, Balk obviously had a nice career. I did look up that Ozma became like a party girl in England and got married at age 15. But the rest of the cast, I didn't. You said you mentioned the Piper Laurie is.
Piper Laurie. She's whatever. She
was a soap opera actress, or
she was in
British actress.
She was in Carrie. She's a mom in Carrie.
Oh, that's right. Okay, yeah.
She's also in The Hustler, which I forgot.
I think there are some things about this movie that feel like they're trying to have a message and they don't quite nail it. There are a few lines where like Balk just kind of steps outside of Dorothy for a second, steps outside of this Kid of Wonder and has these like really, kind of like adult sentences that don't really gel with her character. There's a line where I think she's explaining something about TikTok. Shout out TikTok. I don't know if Disney is suing the social media empire of TikTok right now, but
they can't until they're bought by an American company or by American investors who are being vultures and fucking jumping on the
I wonder,
forced
I wonder
sale.
if there's some listener out there who has some legal sense who's going to know if they have a case or not against TikTok. But yeah, like Dorothy has this line about TikTok where she says like, if his brain runs down, like how could he talk? Or somebody asked her that, and she's like, it happens all the time. Like very kind of
people do that a lot or something.
Yeah,
like that.
People do that a lot or something. And I was like, okay, is this Nancy Reagan?
It's got to be talking about her uncle, right?
Yeah, but it also kind of had this like.
Yeah, like a worldliness to her that probably is beyond her years.
Well, and it comes up again, too, where she has this refrain where she says, it's all right, it can't be helped. She says this, like, as they're falling to their deaths at one point. Like, it's all right, it can't be helped, which feels like a very sort of religious type of, mollification of, like, you can't worry about these things in life. It can't be helped. Like, just do your best. I also, like, yeah, there are a lot of moments, like, I found that Mombi playing the lute reminded me so much of, like, Lorde or Grimes, like, especially when she's, like, in the younger version of herself.
Solo project forthcoming.
Yeah.
I harp a lot on scores on this show, and, like, it started off pretty bad, but, like, it does have this kind of earworm elite motif that comes up as we get further and further in the movie, which again it becomes very signature of this da-ding, da-dum, da-dum, ba-dum. Like going off of Wizard of Oz, you're so fucked when you try to do anything musical. The fact that they were able to kind of get a little foothold in something unique, I give them a little bit of props. A weird message, I would say, for a kid's movie to be drinking melted sulfur. I mean, granted, kids probably aren't going to like rush out
melt sulfur and try to drink it. Yeah,
melt sulfur, try to eat limestone and fuck their teeth up. I don't know how you guys feel, but like I was really empathetic when the Gnome King basically died eating hard-boiled eggs or not even boiled eggs.
It's such a MacGuffin to have it just be. It's so like so fucking anticlimactic to just be like, oh no, the fucking Gnome King's allergic to eggs. Like my note is, did Jason Mantzoukas write this because he's allergic to eggs?
With an old chicken who is not laying eggs.
Yeah,
apparently.
I think it's from the books, but I don't know exactly. So I thought that it was going to be something tied in with eggs are life, and like the Gnome King is not really alive.
Sure.
And like life, because I thought they made some reference to something like that about things that, well, because everything alive turned to stone. When he turned him to stone. I thought maybe that was the force of like inanimate objects versus life. But that's not really.
It's not landed. If that's it, like you could definitely see where with a little groundwork laid.
Yeah,
it could have. Yeah. That could have been the point. Right. I don't feel like they get there though.
No, not at all. And and also like originally I thought when the first couple scenes in Kansas, I thought the theme was going to be like, don't stifle imagination and creativity by electroshock therapy. Mm-hmm. You want to have an active imagination, but then that kind of gets dropped as soon as she goes to Oz.
Yeah,
and they never really do anything with that either. So I don't know what exactly the theme or moral of the story is.
Yeah. I wonder if some of that's because we've got Walter Murch is a famous editor. This is the only movie he directed. And maybe there's a reason for that. I don't know. He was, after they shot the Kansas stuff in the beginning, he was fired. And George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola had to rally big name directors in his defense and like got him reinstated as the director of this movie. But like, it was already there were already issues after the first block of shooting had taken place.
I did notice Gary Kurtz was the executive producer who famously greenlit Star Wars. So I did know there's a connection.
But they brought him on to replace Paul Maslansky because they were worried in pre-production that the budget was getting out of hand. So they brought in Kurtz to like rein in the budget. He was supposed to have like cut it to 16 mil, but at a certain point it ends up back at a reported 28. So I don't know what the fuck happened.
He does a good job of representing turn of the century Kansas, though.
In the UK?
It looked like Kansas, yeah. I thought.
That first 10 or 20 minutes, like going through the shanty towns and like a flat prairie.
And we learned where she's from. She's from Franklin, Kansas, which is an actual town in Kansas. So,
did you go there over the past week to?
Yeah, I'm going to make a pilgrimage this week just to go see it. That's where Dorothy's from.
Are you going to go to Cottonwood Falls and get electroshock?
That place burned to the ground, my friend.
Okay. I should mention that Fairuza Balk was the second youngest of roughly 1,000 actresses who auditioned to play Dorothy, which is pretty crazy.
She just missed out on Boys Don't Cry to Hilary Swank. So
okay.
Kind of an interesting diversion in the road there, because that was a pretty goddamn big role for Hilary Swank going out for win the Academy Award.
Mm-hmm. And ended up getting her another couple nominations.
And wins.
Yeah, one more win, yeah.
So, I mean, I just think about, like, I don't know too much about Balk's life. Being a child actor and surviving it all is, not a guarantee. So that maybe she doesn't want the career that she was on the path for. But, kind of interesting to think about what could have been with Fairuza.
Yeah.
Had she got that one. Or to see Hilary Swank in Return to Oz. Maybe that would...
Well, I think it's probably mostly that Fairuza Balk wasn't the next Karate Kid.
Yeah. Well, she's got
the 90210.
She has such a unique look, right? Like Fairuza Balk is got these like crystal clear blue eyes.
Well, Fairuza is literally it's turquoise in her father's native tongue. I can't remember if he's Persian or something, but it's Fairuza is turquoise. He kind of proclaimed when she was born Fairuza, and that's why her name is Fairuza.
Well, it certainly applies. But like, she also does this thing when she smiles where you see every one of her lower teeth. Or like as she's talking, she has this weird way of showing you every teeth, which I'm sure is really attractive when I'm doing it. But yeah, she's such a unique choice for this movie. I would love to hear kind of...
Well, they chose her because they thought she could basically be Judy Garland's cousin. That's at least what I read, yeah.
And, Garland's in a wig for that thing, too.
Yeah.
I would have liked to have talked to Murch. I assume he's dead, but maybe not.
Yeah, I didn't look.
Like what the casting was like for Fairuza.
Well, okay, so I suspect that some of the motivation with going so young was also that they were probably expecting that there'd be sequels.
Yeah, and they complain a lot less.
They don't know any better. Okay, so let's move on to major gripes. Starting with our guest, if you've got one. What's your biggest gripe with the film this go around?
Yeah, just the fact that there wasn't like a big theme. The bad guy being kind of lame at the end. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you wanted something super scary. I understand you got to kind of hold it back, but in fact, you don't see him really. Like, Mombi would have been a pretty good bad guy.
Yeah, you could have just stuck there.
Yeah, and what I remember from the books is that Oz is a lot more filled out. There's like 4 distinct geographic areas. It's like the north, south, east, west, which the 39 version only kind of touches upon. But there are witches in each of them.
Yeah, well, they're good witch of the north and south, and wicked witch of the east and west. Yeah,
right. Which you could have done a lot more with. But I know if they wanted to adhere to Baum's original works. I guess that's maybe that the Gnome King is. I'm pretty sure that's part of one of the stories.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, but they could have done more with him. I think, like Sean says, you don't really know if he's even a bad guy. I guess his minions seem a little menacing at first, but we're not really. I mean, and also I thought maybe Mombi and him were like rivals. Like,
yeah,
I thought that maybe they'd go at each other, and that would be how Dorothy gets out of it.
Well, he does imprison her, so I could see where you would have remembered that maybe being that they were rivals. But he imprisons her. She's basically beholden to him anyways.
So maybe a clearer conflict would have been.
Yeah, sure.
She's beholden to him.
Because he's getting her the heads.
Yeah. But also, like, Dorothy just kind of opened up the gate to her fucking palace.
Everyone else is turned to stone, so there's no need for her to have it on lockdown.
She just wants people to come in to get more heads.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that.
So, Sean, what's your big grit?
I think the traveling companions is the biggest fucking misfire on this. Shout out Brian Henson, his return to the Unkind Rewind.
Yeah.
But him as Jack, TikTok, Gump, Belina. Maybe kids can be like, oh, they're funny or whatever. But the emotional attachment that we have as kids to the Cowardly Lion, the Tin Man, the Scarecrow. Jesus Christ, what a departure from that. Because we see no real humanizing character in their face like we could with the makeup and the costuming of the original 3 companions that she had. And again, we get them later on when she kind of animates things. And who fucking cares now?
Right.
Because they're a guy in a suit or 2 guys in a suit for the lion and shitty versions of the Scarecrow. Again, he has no articulation to his face. I think that's a really big thing. And as Max said earlier, we don't really know what their intentions are. I mean, Jack kind of wakes up and wants a mom.
Yeah.
TikTok
we don't know what their motivation is at all.
Part of the army. Gump is just a slave. Whereas very clear intentions. I want a fucking heart. I want a brain.
Yeah.
I want courage.
You guys are basically mining the same areas where it's like, Jesus Christ. For me, where it's just, how did this get to production without these things like established?
I think what they're doing is like, if this is a completely new property, they're taking the time, they're fixing these problems. With Oz, they're just banking on those 2 letters.
Yeah.
They're saying, we can just get through this. People are going to come. They're going to fork over their money.
They didn't.
Because this is an Oz property. Yeah, they fucked it up. This is an Oz property. So, like, let's not really... it's kind of in the book, and it's mentioned once in the book. Like, you have to know what to pick and choose, and you have to know...
Well, and the crazy thing is, it's not like the books, the later books in the series weren't something that, like, oh, everyone fucking read these. Max did. Max probably didn't read the books that this was based on.
Yeah, I don't think I did.
And for Wizard of Oz, right, like, such a departure from the book, right, Max? The original.
Yeah. In some respect.
It doesn't matter.
Right.
Yeah. So, how would we fix this movie for today's audience? If you've got something starting with Max, otherwise we can...
Yeah, I think you need some sort of, like, cuddly creature you can merchandise. Like,
oh, sure, yeah.
Like, TikTok is kind of cute, but he's a robot.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like, yeah, better flesh out those secondary characters, better motivations, but just like more personality. Like Jack Pumpkinhead he just says mom a lot. He's not really that funny or, interesting. Gump is barely aware of what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So probably just have better sidekicks, I think would be the big thing. And then, just to decide if you want to, I think I'm okay with it being kind of different from the 39 version.
Sure.
You kind of decide what do you want do you want a clean break from the old movie and be part of the books, or do you want to be away from the books and be kind of in that 39 version world?
Right.
And I think they made their choice in this one, and that's fine, but that's kind of the hard choice you have to make.
I think Max is right on the money. There's 2 things you can do. One is you do this as a straight sequel and you get a 16-year-old. You get somebody who can be Garland's age. And it's a continuation of where we left, and we were consistent with what we've, where we left off. Or you do Wizard of Oz 1985. And you do the books. Again, I mean, we saw this happen with Tim Burton and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, right?
I thought you were going to go Planet of the Apes.
Well, there's that, but
or even Wonka's derivative. It's not from the books at all, and they
But even before Wonka, right? When he did Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, he's like, I'm going to do a straight adaptation of the book, which is what the book's called, Charlie, not Willie.
Yeah.
And, it doesn't really succeed for a lot of reasons, but at least we kind of knew what was going on. There's a Charlie, there's the grandparents, there's, like we went along with it because we knew the rules. We don't know the fucking rules here. Yeah. We don't know where we're jumping off of. Mm-hmm. And it feels like they wanted their cake and eat it too.
Yeah, my fix is you need a script doctor to actually ground all of the motivations and really like make sure that you have like an actual fucking villain that makes sense, and that the secondary characters also have motivations that they're not just there to be traveling companions to the main character. Because right now it's just everything's kind of flat.
Everything's flat, and there's tons of shit in it, right? Like,
everything's flat, like motivate, like in terms of like depth of character, not like, I think their like production design's not flat, and there are interesting things in the movie, but I think, just motivationally speaking, like, does anyone have any motivation here? The only person with motivation is Auntie M, and she just wants fucking Dorothy to do shit on the farm.
She just wants a night to fuck her husband back to life. That's the problem, is that Dorothy is not sleeping, so she can't get her fuck on.
Yeah. That's probably it, yeah.
She wants that kid out by 8 p.m.
So your read is that he's distraught because he's not
not finishing the house.
He's gotten blue-balled, basically.
Dude, I mean,
he's in a 6 months long of like not getting to get boned or boned, rather.
Try trying to get laid when you got kids running around the house who won't go to sleep.
Yeah,
it's not going to happen.
Okay, so saving graces. Max, what was your favorite moment or element of the film?
Well, now or like when I was a kid?
Now. Rewatch. Yeah.
When I was a kid, I think I liked that the game conclusion. Like, I thought that was at the time kind of cool. Uh-huh. But like I said, now I was a little disappointed with something so straightforward and simple.
Uh-huh.
No, I don't know. I guess like you kind of said, it's kind of a cool bunch of stuff that happens, but there's no real common thread that binds everything together, really, other than Dorothy. So it's just, there's kind of like a lot of neat moments, but I don't know if one particular stands out.
Okay.
Mine would be, and I'll preface this by saying I don't really know her work. I have kind of a bad connotation from how poorly she was directed in American History X. But I think Balk is really good here.
Uh-huh.
I think the workload that she has to do in something like this, she's probably got mental and physical scars from a production like this.
Sure, absolutely.
But she's really brings it. Like, those are real tears at certain points.
Probably because it's so cold.
Probably because she has hypothermia. or there's like a piece of set that is like nicked her calf, or Lord knows. But yeah, I mean, coming in as I said earlier, an impossible job to replace Dorothy in our minds. This is, as far as I know, the only time between 39 and 85 that we see Dorothy on film. That is,
I know there were other sequels, but I don't know who was in them and what characters.
Yeah, they could be some. Yeah, I don't know of any other Wizard of Oz movie that would have been in kind of the public eye in the last 40 years. And Balk, I think she kind of exceeds expectations, and certainly she's put herself on the map for me. I wonder, Josh, if we'll ever see Fairuza Balk again on this podcast.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see.
Not to get ahead of ourselves. I think for me, it was the zero fucks given about terrifying the intended audience, because I don't think there's any way that the Wheelers and that the fucking hospital that Dorothy is sent to are not like terrifying to a child. It's really funny to me to just see how they treated their audience. So for me, that's my favorite part. Okay, so getting out of here, Max, overall, how did you feel about your return to... Sorry.
Your return to
yes,
Oz.
I know. I stumbled over it. How did you feel about your return to Oz after all this time?
It was a great nostalgia trip. Like I said, it wasn't as weird as I thought, and it wasn't as bad as I thought. I mean, like I said, it's not a great coherent film, but as like something that's creative and an extension of what we've seen before, it was a good way to spend 2 hours. A little long for a kids movie. They could edit it out some things, I think, a little bit. But overall, I thought it was a pretty good film that it was better than I expected, for sure.
Nice. So before we say goodbye to the listeners at home and to the audience on YouTube, where can listeners find you, Max?
They can find me at royalsreview.com. It's mostly going to be baseball talk, so...
The daily threads are, because there's a news thread every day, and those are not... Yeah, those are open conversation. You wouldn't have to be a Royals fan to enjoy.
Yeah, but
it's a daily thing.
Yeah, it's a baseball site, but yeah, it's a good community where we talk about all... obviously we had Josh on as a writer, so we're going to veer into some strange topics at times.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great place to come and hang out. So anyone that wants to hang out on their site and chat, like I'm always in the comments section. So stop on.
We want a very vague reference to Return to Oz in some article this season, and only the hardcore Return to Ozers should get it.
Yeah,
something about eggs being poisoned, maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, Bobby Witt had a tough night going 0 for 5. Probably had some poison eggs.
Well, thank you, Max, for opening up your childhood to the scrutiny of the Unkind Rewind. We're so glad you joined us.
Thanks, Max.
Thanks for having me, guys. This is fun.
Yeah, this is super fun. So glad you could make it. You've just listened to another installment of the Unkind Rewind podcast, mining and potentially ruining your childhood for content, one film at a time. Unkind Rewind is a Munchcast production and can be ingested wherever you listen to podcasts and on the Unkind Rewind YouTube channel. Music for this and every other episode of Unkind Rewind was composed by Divorcio Suave. Rate and review Unkind Rewind on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods, Yelp, IMDb, Consumer Reports, Google Reviews, and TripAdvisor. Links to all of our social media accounts are in our show notes, but you'll find us as at Unkind Rewind Pod on nearly every social media platform that makes sense. If you had a question, concern, complaint, or positive feedback, you can email the podcast at unkindrewindpod@gmail.com, or you can join the lively Munchcast Discord to discuss this or any other episode of the Unkind Rewind with like-minded people. This dialogue with the pod may just make it into the next week's ep, so chat away. The Unkind Rewind Patreon will be coming soon, so start squirreling that pocket change away. Thank you for listening to another Unkind Rewind.